So welcome back to the Arcane Forge. My name is Josh, and today we're going to be talking about a big one. We're going to be talking about how combat works in 5th edition D&D. Now there's a huge amount to cover in this video, so I've decided to give it all the proper depth that it requires. I'm going to break this video up into a series. I'll leave little links down below so you can click between each video when I upload them. But today we're going to be talking about, obviously, part 1, how combat actually works. Now before we get started, if you enjoy this video and you like the videos that I'm making in general, make sure to leave a little like, a little thumbs up down below. Maybe even subscribe for more videos like this every week, because I see all of those. It's a really big boon to us. It helps us grow as a channel, and hopefully we can carry on making more videos like this for you. But anyway, let's get started with the video. So combat in D&D is broken up into rounds, and those rounds last a few seconds, 6 seconds, 7 seconds, something like that, in which all sorts of stuff is going on. Kind of imagine like a board game where everybody gets their turn. You go around clockwise and everybody has their turn, and once every single person at the table has had their turn, that's the end of what's called a round, which in D&D terms in combat would be 6 seconds. Now in D&D, to make things even more unpredictable, we don't go round in a certain specific order. What you do is, every single time, you will roll for initiative, and that's often actually how you know that you're in combat. The DM will say, roll for initiative, and that's how you know things are about to get really serious. Your initiative is what determines the order in which you get to act in this round, in each round. It's a measure of how quick you are to get started, how willing you are to embrace combat, or maybe how quickly you just thought of what you need to be doing right now to get out of trouble. Importantly, just like everything else in D&D, it's totally random. It's never going to be the same each time, so this is why we roll. Someone in the group or multiple people will then get a piece of paper and they'll write down everybody's numbers. So what you do is you roll a d20. A 20-sided dice, and then, because naturally you have a character sheet, some of you are quicker than others, the lumbering barbarian might be less fast than the nimble rogue, to that d20 you then add your dexterity modifier. The DM even does this for whatever monster or monsters you might be fighting, and then you write them all down on this piece of paper, and that determines who goes in what order. Naturally, the highest number going first, the lowest number going last. Once you've gone through the whole list, that counts as 6 seconds worth of time having overlapped, and you start from the beginning again from that same number. Now this wasn't always the case, and some DMs might prefer to do this slightly differently, as with all things in D&D, but that's the way initiative is rolled out in the book. I've played 1st edition campaigns, for example, where this would vary massively, and instead of rolling in this capacity, if you were casting a spell on your turn, for example, that's really obvious. It's a lengthy process, it takes a lot of time. A lot of people can see someone casting a spell from a distance, there's lots of magical energy flowing in the air, so you'd have to declare what spell you were going to cast beforehand. In fact, there's been an Unearthed Arcana recently that has talked about doing the same sort of things, with lengthier tasks being prioritized in the turn order, i.e. it takes longer for something more difficult to do, and therefore will be moved down the turn order. But as for the base game, roll a d20, add your dexterity modifier, that's where you land in your turn. Now it's important to note as well that 6 seconds doesn't pass for every single person that's going on. 6 seconds elapses after everybody has taken their turn. So instead of statically jumping from one person to another, saying, I now take my turn, like a kind of Final Fantasy game, like a tactics game, the idea is that you're not so much taking this in turns in game, as you are in real life, you're all happening at once. You might not see the mage cast the fireball next to you because it's happening as you leap into combat to stab someone in the face. A little pro tip, therefore, is whenever you start your turn with an action, make sure to say while. Make sure to pay attention to what the last person did and say, while he runs towards that thing, I go and do this. To give it that sense of immediacy, this is all happening at the same time, this is all happening within those same 6 seconds. Now there's an exception to turn order, there's an exception to this rolling for initiative thing, and that's surprise. You might see a load of orcs or something like that down below when you sit on your cliff top, and you know that you want to fight them. But you're not going to wait for them to come to you, you're not going to show them where you are, you're not going to display your position. So you might try and get the jump on them, you might leap from this hill, from this mountaintop, wherever the hell you are, or out of cover, you might spring a trap, all this kind of stuff, and surprise your opponents. And what that means is that you get a surprise round. You personally get a surprise round to attack that thing, and then initiative order starts. So it's like getting a free turn without any repercussions. You might do your surprise round, and then roll initiative, being the highest person on the turn order, and get a whole other turn just to yourself. However, just remember that any rule that works for you also works for all the monsters and anything that the DM controls. So keep your wits about you, because the DM might also get a surprise round on you. But in this round, your turn is fast approaching. What can you do on your turn? When your little number comes up, you got to decide. Well, to make this easy for you, everybody gets a certain number of actions that they can perform. You get a movement action, you get a main action, you get free actions, and you might get a bonus action. So free actions to start off with are things that you can do at any time. They're things like speaking to your other team members, shouting aloud, searching for things, making perception checks, all that kind of stuff. Certain checks might take a bit of time, and your DM might rule that that takes a full action or a bonus action to complete. But generally speaking, most things that you can just perceive or speak, things that don't involve actually fighting or running anywhere, you can do as a free action, and you can do that at any point. Similarly, again, depending on what your DM might say, other members of your team might be able to speak to you out of turn order as their free action. Now, some people don't like doing this because it might mean that you might give away clues to other people that they might not be able to notice from their perspective. It might break immersion a little bit, but just check with your DM. They might be cool with it, they might not be. The next thing you'll want to do is move. Now, you might want to run towards an enemy to get closer into combat with them. You might want to move away from them in order to stay nice and safe. You might want to jump over a ledge, what have you. The important thing to note is that a movement action can be broken up over your turn. You'll notice when you created a character that you'll have a speed, and that's roughly speaking going to be 30 feet, 25 feet, something like that if you're a smaller creature, and that's how much you can move on your turn. Now, the DM might have placed a little mat out on the floor for you guys to visualize where you might be running to, where everything might be positioned, all this kind of stuff. If they're using the theater of the mind approach, it's up to them to tell you how much you need to run to approach something or get behind cover or what have you. But if there's a nice playing mat or some dungeon tiles out in front of you, you'll notice that there's lots of squares on them. Usually the scale for D&D is that each one of those squares represents 5 feet of your potentially 25 or 30 foot movement. And as I say, you can break this up over your turn. So you might want to take a free action, let the rest of your team know what you're about to do, run maybe 5 feet so you reach whatever creature you're supposed to be fighting, and then leg it, run away in some other entirely different direction with the rest of your movement. You can spend however many of your 30-ish feet that you like in your movement phase. You don't have to use any of it at all. You can make an attack and then run, you can run and then attack, but you can jump and all this kind of stuff. So if you're jumping from a standstill, you can jump for exactly half of your strength modifier. That counts the same number of feet as it would to run somewhere. So you just take that away from your 30 foot worth of movement. A long jump allows you to jump the entirety of your strength modifier in feet, but it requires that you've been running for at least 10 feet before you start. So you need to get a good run up before you get an actual long jump. Hopefully you won't be jumping anything that's larger than 3 or 4 feet, because that's going to be really difficult. The same goes for a high jump. If you want to jump upwards, you're looking at 3 plus your strength modifier if you've been running for at least 10 feet beforehand. And if you're doing it from a standstill again, then it's half that number. Now, DMs vary on this a lot. I do a lot as well, because I think keeping that quite so mathematical can be difficult for gameplay sometimes. If someone wants to do something really cool but they have a really terrible strength stat, but they have really good athletics or acrobatics, then maybe you want to just make them roll a check instead to see whether or not they'll accomplish the task. Who knows, it might be more fun that way, but if you want to keep everything rigidly to the rules, that's how they're written in the book, and that's what you should be doing. So just ask your DM, say, my strength stat's really rubbish, but I have all this athletics, I have a proficiency in athletics, can I add that to my jump, or can I maybe make a roll, can I make an athletics check to see if I can make this jump? By and large, they're going to say yes, but if not, you're going to have to go with it. So at least you know now. Next up, you've got the big one. You've got your main action. Everybody gets one of these, and it is the center point of your entire turn. So as your main action, you get to do one of these following things. Only one. You can do many more of them over different turns, but you only get to pick one per turn. You can attack something, cast a spell, or dash. Dashing is when you get to move your full movement speed again. Really great for when you're just sprinting away from that Indiana Jones style ball that you've set off the trap for. But obviously the downside being that you don't get to then make an attack because you're dashing. You can disengage, you can dodge, you can help someone, you can hide, you can search for something, you can use an object, or you can ready an action. Those are all the things that fall under the jurisdiction of your main action. There are some other things that you can do with your turn as well though, but we'll go through what each of those things mean just now. Let's go through the one that you're going to be using most often, attack. attack, right? This is combat, let's do some attacking. So as part of your movement action, you automatically draw any weapons that you haven't already drawn by specifying it. So there's no need to worry about that in your attack action. But then when you get close enough to attack something, you're base to base with it, you're within 5 feet, or whatever range your weapon has on it, you roll a d20 and then you add the relevant modifier. For most things, like a big two-handed hammer, it's going to be strength. You add the strength modifier to your d20. If you're proficient in that weapon, you then also add your proficiency bonus, which to start off with is going to be 2, but will increase as levels go on. You add all those numbers up, and if the number that you end up with is higher than the armor class of the monster, then you hit it. Similarly, if anything's trying to attack you, they have to beat your armor class. If they do, they hit you. If they don't, then so be it. When you roll these numbers, you tell the DM what you've got, and then they will tell you whether or not you successfully hit or not. You never really get to know the armor class of the creature, so you can always keep trying each turn. You'll never know quite what connects and what doesn't until a process of elimination comes by, and you'll find out roughly what you need to get to beat their armor class each time. The DM might never tell you what number actually beats the armor class. They might just say, the hammer blow connects with its head, or they might say, nimbly dodges out of the way, just narrowly avoiding your attack instead. They might be flattened outright with you and just say, the 13 that you rolled isn't enough to hit it. But that tends to break the immersion a little bit and is less likely to happen. Now, strength isn't always the way to go, isn't always the thing that you add to your attacks. If you're using something called a finesse weapon, like daggers, a sleek elven rapier, or something like that, you get a choice between whether or not you want to use strength or dexterity, depending on which one of yours is higher. If you're using ranged weapons like guns, bows, or crossbows, you have to use dexterity. You're aiming down the sights of something, you're not using your strength to throw that at someone. Unless you're actually throwing the crossbow at someone. Don't do that. Now, hopefully you've beaten the creature's armor class, and that means you get to slam it in the head, and that does the damage that you need to do. Following that, knowing that you've hit the creature, you can then apply damage. Now, the weapon that you have has a set of dice next to it. You can check the player's handbook for the weapons table to find out what you might actually deal. But if you're hitting it with a dagger, that's going to be something like 1d4 damage, bows 1d6, and so on. Just make sure to find the weapon that you're actually using and how much damage it will deal. Now, on top of what you roll there, you then add the characteristic that you used to hit that creature if you successfully connected. So, let's say you hit it with a big hammer, that means you add your strength modifier to it again, and that's how much damage it will do. If you hit it with a ranged weapon, that means you use your dexterity, you add that again. Now, unfortunately, you don't get to add your proficiency bonus to the damage of attack, only when you're trying to hit things. So make sure to try and keep it in your mind that there are 2 phases to hitting something, whether or not you hit it, and then the damage that you deal. And that way you'll remember that the first one always has your proficiency bonus if you're proficient in the weapon that you're using. If you're not, you don't get to add it. And the second part, you don't get to do proficiency because you can't be proficient in damage dealing just with wielding a weapon. Now, if you're using 2 weapons at a time, then the rules are slightly different. You have to decide which one of your hands is going to be your main hand and which one is going to be your off hand. Let's say you're using 2 daggers. Your main hand, let's say, is in your right hand. Combat works exactly as predicted just then, but you also get to make a second attack because you have a weapon in your other hand. You're less good with it though, you're not ambidextrous, or at least not very likely to be ambidextrous, and as a result, you attack slightly worse with it. With this, you can use your bonus action later on to make a second attack with that weapon, whatever weapon happens to be in your other hand, and all you do is you roll a d20, you leave it completely flat and neat. If that happens to beat the creature's armor class, then good. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. And then when it comes to damage, you just roll the weapon's flat damage. You don't get to add things like your strength or dexterity modifier to it. So 2 weapon fighting is great, gives you a second chance to attack something if your first one missed, or maybe just do some more damage in your turn, but it's way less likely to be effective. There's tons more that I want to talk about, but sadly, there's not enough time for today. So I'm going to break this up into the end of part 1, and we'll carry on with part 2 next week. Either way, I hope you found part 1 really useful. If you did, make sure to leave a little thumbs up, favorite this video, and subscribe for more content like this. And join us again next week for part 2 of how combat works in 5th edition D&D. Until next time, I'll see you later.